Good morning, everyone. It looks like we have a pretty full house. We have about, looks like 80 or so participants joining us today. So our work this morning is with a panel of veteran virtual teachers. With us is Mary Taggart. Mary, you want to say hello?
Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well and feeling well. Welcome to this panel.
Excellent. Thank you, Mary. Mary is a high school English teacher with the Jedi Virtual School. Also joining us is Emily Williams. Emily, you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone.
Thanks, Emily. Emily is middle school literacy and language arts, also with Jedi Virtual School. Brad Wisaki. I hope I said that right.
Yep,
Brad,
Wisaki, yep.
Thank you. Brad, want to say hi?
Yeah, welcome everybody. I know we're in a obviously crazy place and unprecedented, and we'll see what we can do to help you out the best we can, because I don't know. I don't have all the answers, but we'll see what we can help each other out with. And I think power in numbers will be really good here.
Absolutely. And Brad is high school chemistry, also with Jedi Virtual School. Also joining us, Jamie Severud is the director of Jedi Virtual School. Jamie, you want to say hi?
Good morning, everyone.
Thanks for joining us, Jamie. And facilitating the chat room will be Beth Clark, who's the Senior Director of Digital Learning at CISA 2.
Hi, everyone. Good morning.
And also with us is Mitchell Lilly, and Mitchell is the Executive Director for Marketing and Communications with CISA 2. So we are all here to support you in your transition from face-to-face to virtual learning. So this is a panel discussion. Our panelists will start with just some introductions. You'll see on the screen kind of an overview of our conversation. We'll encourage you to use the chat room to ask questions for each of the sections of the conversation as they emerge, and Beth will be moderating that, and so we'll be verbalizing the questions to the rest of the group. So let's start with introductions. Just a little bit about how you made the transition from face-to-face to virtual, and kind of what you do at Jedi. And Brad, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. So I was 15 years in a traditional high school science classroom, chemistry and physics, up until just this last year, and I was looking for some more flexibility for myself in personal and professional life, and a change after 15 years being in a classroom. It was just time to do something different, and I found the virtual world, and has been really interesting. I actually work both with Jedi and another virtual school, so I can talk a little of that when we get to some of those things. So I have a couple different perspectives I can help you guys out with. Again, I don't have all the answers by any means. I'm still learning things as I go, but just some of the observations I've been able to make in the last 6 to 7 months in this virtual world and what that is. But high school science, I guess, is my discipline, but I think a lot of this stuff is going to fit for everybody, and I don't think we have to be content specific at all. We'll go from there. So that's me.
Thanks, Brad. Emily.
Hi, everyone. So I taught elementary, and I taught bilingual in a building, and I worked in an autism school as well. So I did that, and then I made this transition. So this is my 3rd year with Jedi. So I've taught elementary with Jedi, and now I'm in the middle school language arts and our middle school online literacy course. So if anyone has specific questions about ELA and middle school, because those are kind of probably the younger kiddos on, that you teach on this panel, I'm here, so feel free to ask.
Wonderful, thank you. And Mary.
Good morning again. I have taught brick and mortar for 30 years. I'm still in the brick and mortar school. And 12 years ago, some folks came to some of us at Whitewater High School and asked if we would be interested in developing some Moodle classes with the Jedi. And then Moodle has gone away just a little bit. There are still some classes I teach through Moodle, but we are more focused on the Apex virtual school. And like I said, I've been teaching that for 12 years. So there are some interesting things with high school. Some high school students really do not want any face-to-face, but at the same time, they love positive feedback, and especially in the writing, they just suck in all of the comments in their writing, and that's really a good way to connect with some high school students. But we'll talk about some other ways to connect also.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm just seeing some questions in the chat. Jamie, would you mind just briefly talking about the students that you serve in JEDI?
Sure, we serve students. We actually have a 4K program, but we just started that this year, all the way through 12th grade. So we are a full service school. We serve, JEDI is a school that was built by a consortium of districts, and we have 15 different districts that use JEDI for a variety of reasons. And many of our students stay within their brick and mortar school and take 1 or 2 classes with us just to expand their horizons. Classes that they can't offer in their smaller high school that we can offer. And then we also have about 250 students that are full-time with us. And some of those students are traveling the world playing tennis. Some of them are hockey stars. There's a variety of reasons. We have a couple of kids who are homebound because of medical reasons. Lots of different reasons people come to virtual school. So we serve a huge variety of students, and serving students with IEPs is like we could talk about that for a whole topic. So Emily, if you want to email me your questions on that one, I can give you my response about how we do that. Personally, I don't know that we're going to get into that specifically.
Yeah, that might be a great follow-up webinar, definitely, because we're getting a lot of questions about that too. Great, thank you. So one of the things that we are getting a lot of questions about is, okay, so you know, in a brick and mortar school, I get to school at what, probably 6:30 or 7 in the morning, right? And I'm there till 4 or later. And that's my office, that's my classroom. So can you talk a little bit about your home office setup and what that looks like in terms of managing your day? Anybody here to start? Emily, how about that? How about you?
Yeah, so I have an office downstairs. So I have 2 little ones, so it works out really well. And well, one's in school and one's in daycare, so it works out really well. So I kind of just structure my day kind of normally. I get up, I take my kid to school, not anymore, but and I just, you know, I schedule meetings. So we, you know, I have a few hours each day where we call them office hours. So they're virtual, and then students can schedule times to meet with me, and that's really helpful because then you can go over content with them, any specific content or questions they have. So one thing I use, and I don't know if we want to get into this right now, but to schedule meetings, and I shared this with Valerie, is called Calendly. It's a really great resource. I think most JEDI teachers use that, and it's a link, and it's in my email signature, and students really can just, that way you don't have to do the email back and forth, and students can schedule meetings with you. So I love using that, and you can schedule them around your day. So I try to make office hours kind of some in the morning. I try to do one night a week where they're kind of in the evening, if that works better for students, because our students with online learning work at very different times of day. So yeah, I try to do that, and then I spend a few hours each day grading and giving feedback. Language arts, when you're grading a paper, it's a little more intensive. So you have to make sure you can give good feedback. You can use Google Docs to kind of write those comments in for students. Yeah, so that's pretty much my day. I mean, I do love having the Calendly meetings with students, and I use Zoom for that, or some students prefer phone call. That's fine. Google Hangouts, another platform, Skype. So we kind of try to stick to those main ones. But yeah, that's kind of my day. I love it. So yeah, it's a really good time to, one thing I recommend is really trying to have those one-on-one times if you're able to with students so they can connect with you.
Great. And so the resource that Emily spoke about was Calendly, and Beth put a link to that in the chat, and definitely we will create a list of those resources that our panel recommends. So there are some other questions in the chat in terms of home office setup and schedule. Brad or Mary, maybe you could talk about what does that look like in terms of synchronous meetings with students? Do you have a schedule for that, or how do you manage that?
I'll go ahead. This is Mary again. Being a teacher also in brick and mortar, I don't have the flexibility during the daytime because I'm teaching in my other job. So typically my interactions with students come after brick and mortar ends. So late afternoon, evening, and weekends. And if they need to set up a time for some additional help, we use the phone, we use email. I do have a Skype listed, but I think I've only Skyped one time. Students, I'm finding, don't really use the Skype with me anyway. They may do that with other teachers. And they also have the ability for the use of Zoom. So those are some things to schedule opportunities with students. And then, like Emily was saying, the interaction is super important and they love the feedback. As I said earlier, I use the Google Docs. I encourage students to look at their Google Doc that I will send back to them because I put lots and lots of comments about their writing in there. And then they have an opportunity to make some corrections and do some editing and really learn how to do some peer editing with me, even though I'm not their peer, they're learning that editing opportunity. So it's more of a conversation sometimes, just even in the Google Doc. And as I said, they love that feedback and they really like hearing from us, even though they may not want some of that face-to-face time.
Mhm.
Great, thank you. Brad or Mary, do you have other suggestions in terms of your home office setup and what that looks like? Emily talked about having a separate space in her basement where she works. Other things that work for you in terms of the physical setup?
Yeah, I'll just mention, you know, if you can find that space and make it a, you know, an office as much as possible. Obviously, we've all probably created that because we had intended to. You guys might be, I mean, it's going to look a little different as you're being thrown into this, but, you know, finding a place where it's like, you know, workspace and the kids know that, or you know that, and you can kind of focus on those things rather than worrying about the laundry that needs to be done or the dishes that are needing to be done. Just kind of somehow find, and, you know, so obviously everyone's different, and if it's the kitchen table because that's the only space you have, maybe that is it, but find a place that's comfortable too. I had tried to do like the couch for a while and then your back is slouching and all this stuff. Like, so I found, like, you know, a desk, and every once in a while, sure, I stand up and move around, but try to make it as officey as possible, but also know that the flexibility is there, and that's okay. And, you know, don't feel that you have to sit for 8 hours a day because that's not what we're used to as a classroom teacher. So find something that works for you, that really works in terms of how are you mentally into what you're supposed to be into, rather than everything else that's going on around the house, which I'm sure is easier said than done. But that's something that I've really found.
Great, thank you. And I'm just looking at the chat in terms of home office setup. It looks like I think we've addressed those questions. Let's transition to schedule. There's a lot of memes in social media about it's 8 o'clock, it's time to change from your daytime pajamas to your nighttime pajamas. So how do you manage your schedule and how do you differentiate between work and home, and what does that look like? Let's see, who'd like to start? Emily, you want to take that one to start with?
Sure. So for me, because this is what I do every day, so I'm not in a building, so this is kind of my full-time thing. I really try to, and even now, I'm sure we're all kind of starting to like get up, get dressed, have my coffee after I take my kid to school, kind of really just settle in, just like I'm in a normal office. And I think it took some time to get to that point. And I know everyone's kind of transitioning with these crazy times right now. And I think it's just really important every day, just kind of trying to have that mindset, like what would I be doing if I was getting ready for work? So really trying to get ready and trying to get in that mode. And then I really just, it depends. So if I have a student meeting, I try to schedule some of those early in the morning. That kind of gets me going. Or I try to start with just some grading, some email check-ins. I think it's just great to really just kind of get into it. And then of course, throughout the day, you know, it's important to make sure you get up, you move, and for a walk, going on a run, whatever you need to do, because like Brad was saying, you know, it can, if you're sitting for a while, which you guys aren't used to in brick and mortar schools, you're always on your feet, you know, it can kind of hurt your back. So yeah, definitely get up and get moving as much as you can. Take those breaks, just like we tell our students, brain break. So I do that throughout the day too. So even if it's just walking down to the basement and throwing laundry in, something little like that.
Mhm. And so Brad, if you could talk about your schedule, and then also how do students know your schedule, and what's that sort of combination look like between your schedule and your student schedule?
Al,
Sure.
and Brad, before you talk about that, speaking of schedules in the chat, wondering about if you put out a schedule for students, like a suggested schedule. So if you can just address all of your schedule, how you communicate, and how do students get in a routine, and do you help them with their schedule?
Yeah, so I think one thing to remember here for those of you that are joining us, JEDI is unique that we are as teachers, we're facilitating students learning through a learning management system, through a curriculum that is prescribed and they are logging into. An APEX, if you're not familiar, like an APEX or a Moodle, basically, and this is how I describe it to people who don't know when they're asking, what does it mean to teach virtually? Think of it as a textbook online that students are working through, and they have activities and videos and things, and they're working through that curriculum, and we're here to facilitate as helpers. We're not necessarily delivering. So that is one thing to be aware of here, a slight difference of what JEDI looks like compared to a traditional schooling and what you're probably working on. Now, as I say that, I'm also going to say the other virtual school I work for, I actually do have classes that I meet with on a twice a week basis. So I actually have a schedule. I have a Zoom scheduled meeting where students log into my meeting and we are going through content and we're working on, like, it's technically a project-based class. So I'm delivering information that will help them along their way and setting up a project that they're working on outside of school, which would maybe be a little bit more what we're looking for in this new realm of virtual learning, not just prescribed curriculum learning. So with all that being said, my schedule has been very variable because I do have a couple of different things I'm juggling, and uniquely and I don't know if this is something, whether it's unique or weird or what, but I'm able to kind of like just juggle and move, and I don't necessarily need a perfect routine every day. Now, that's just me, and I know a lot of people do, but at the same time I say that, I still got up, I still went for either a walk or a jog or a run, or went to the gym when I could, and then got on the computer, and just kind of depending on the day, what do I need, and I have a priority list in my head of what I need to do. So it's just really finding what works for you. I don't think there's that one magic answer, but routine obviously is the best that you can do if that's your idea. So lots of, that flexibility thing is hard, and just knowing that you don't live on the bell schedule, which is pretty nice. I'm not gonna lie, that's a really nice thing of it, but sometimes that can be difficult too. And so that's kind of how I've set mine up. I don't have a great answer in there, I don't think. It's just kind of my background of what I'm dealing with on a day-to-day, week-by-week basis.
Sure. And
And
so,
I'd like to take on the,
yeah, thanks,
the kids'
Jenny.
schedule.
Yep.
So all of our full-time JEDI students have learning coaches, and they are monitoring the progress that students are making in all of their classes throughout the week. And so they often set up schedules for kids. If they're taking 7 classes, what a week would look like for them. So it really depends. What they really focus on a couple different things. Sorry, my daughter's doing dishes. They ask the children if they would prefer a block schedule, or if they would prefer, if they like a lot of variety in their day, and they set up their schedule based on that. So there's some kids who prefer to only work on 4 classes at a time. And so they will do an A-B schedule, and on Mondays you're going to do this, on Tuesdays you're going to do this, and they put out the schedule for the kids. They don't necessarily assign times, but what they'll do is they'll say, work an hour and a half in this topic, work an hour and a half in this subject, work an hour and a half, because a lot of our kids, and you're going to find this for high school kids, like to work from 10 o'clock until 5 o'clock versus 7 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And so they're adjusting their day. And then we have kids who want more of a traditional, I'm gonna work on all 7 classes every single day, and they're 45 minutes this, then this, then this, and they try to work with them to put together that schedule. I think the really important thing when you're talking about kids' schedules is putting in kids' voice, letting them have some say in what their schedule is going to be, helps them stick to it so much more.
Mhm.
How do I get my kids to do the dishes? That's just a lot of, sorry, I'm watching the chat. She's on a schedule. She has to do her list of chores throughout the day because my kids' schedule includes chores and exercise and recess. So my kids are on their own schedule and I'm on my schedule. And I think that a lot of you are going to manage having kids at home now. Like, you talk about office setup. My office is my living room because I don't have a separate office. So I can manage the whole house. And now I have 2 kids at home too. So
Mhm.
I think we're all managing my schedule and kids' schedule. So lots
And
of
Can I
fun.
just jump in just for a second?
yeah.
So you guys, when we're talking about schedule in a virtual school like Jedi, their schedules, just so that you know, are going to look different than your schedules in this situation. I just want to make that clear. So right now we are, I don't know if you want to call it a crisis, but we're in a time that is just unknown. And so what is happening, just so that this is out in the air, is that families now are at home and they're in a different routine than they ever have been. Some of the parents are actually, working from home just like you are, and are trying to manage their students, their children being at home and working on a schedule. What I am hearing from districts at this point is that there's just so much. There's just so much. And what we really have to do is focus on the essentials. So one of the questions in the chat is, what does an ELA middle school lesson look like? And what I want to say is, and you guys, please, panelists, please follow up with this, is first of all, we need to just really focus on how is everybody doing? Focus on when is a good time for us to meet, if it's synchronous. So like what we're doing right now is synchronous. So when is a good time? I'll have office hours at this time. Students work at different times now that they are able
Mhm.
to work online. They've got to figure out themselves as a learner, as an online learner, and there's going to be a transition with that. So are they night owls and they like to access the content at night? Are they early risers and they'd rather do it then? So just having a variety of schedules. Now, what Jamie was saying is that in Jedi, to help them with a schedule, you might provide that schedule for them. What I want you to know right now, parents are freaking out
Yep.
because they're getting all of these schedules from their instructors, and they just are like, I'm supposed to adhere to the schedule. I don't know how I can do this with our children, especially, and now that you're thinking of middle school through high school, they're more independent, but also being really aware of their emotional needs at home, when things work for their family. They may be taking care of siblings at home because their parents are gone, all of those kind of things too. So just so you know, I just wanted to put that out there, and I'll stop talking. But
Mhm.
there are a lot of different variances right now in our situation, and that we need to just be aware of those.
Right, and I believe in the onboarding for Jedi too, and Jamie, you can speak to this. There are some sort of management guidance, I guess, documents and suggestions for the learning coach, and the learning coach would be akin to sort of the parent who's at home right now. And in terms of the schedule and expectations, any sort of suggestions that you might have that would transfer well from Jedi to our current situation?
I would say, the learning coach is really awesome because they get to see the overview of the whole kid's day. It's very much like a homeroom teacher at the elementary level, in the sense that they're looking at the whole child, where the teachers tend to be focusing on their topics and their subjects, and that's where it gets a little harder. And you guys are not going to have learning coaches to manage the daily stuff for the kids. But we often, some of the same advice that our panel teachers are giving are the same advice that we give to students. Set a place to do your studies. Set a place, find a desk, make that your school space. Set yourself a schedule and try to stick to it as much as possible. It's really important to dedicate time and space to your schooling every single day. And that looks different for every single child. So, and that's the big thing that you just have to take into consideration.
Great, thank you.
Can I pop in at this moment, this Mary again?
Yeah.
Before we were shut down, before March 16th, that Friday, I had spoken to my students at the high school, and I said what I was going to do was put in a weekly syllabus into Google Classroom. And I said, this is a suggested pacing chart, and pacing charts are something that we use in JEDI, and a couple other people have commented on that. But I said, you know, I know that you're going to have other responsibilities during this time, but this is what I'm suggesting you do each day. And I had put a Monday through Friday schedule in. And of course, it's only been 1 week so far because we're on spring break this week. But I said, I know you're going to maybe work on this at various times during the day. I can't necessarily set up a time, okay, everybody meet, because that might not be feasible for what your home schedule is and some other responsibilities that you have. But from that first week, there was some good success. Students were completing work that was assigned and submitting it in classroom. And I think I'm just going to keep with that as kind of a weekly pace chart. And of course, I have to make some variations because I can't do exactly what I was doing in brick and mortar, but just adapting the best that we can to what they might be able to do at home. That might be a suggestion. I know it's probably a little more difficult with the younger grades, but even middle school, well, and you know, probably the younger grades too, they could learn to be organized this way. And it might be, okay, here's what I need to accomplish this week. And if it's at midnight, maybe that's when I'm going to do it. I had a student who was working on an essay last night and submitted it at 12:30 a.m. this morning. So, you know, it's just, you know, something variable that they're going to be able to choose when they want to actually do something, especially if they're older. But I did say too, you know, in part of the syllabi, I had said, you know, develop a routine. Don't stay in your PJs all day. Get up, take your shower, do some exercise, or then take your shower, whatever needs to happen so you feel some regularity too, because it'd be real easy just to become a couch potato and you know, not pay attention to any of these other things. But I said, get some exercise, do a project that, you know, your parents want you to do. But then if you're reading The Great Gatsby, this is the chapter and this is the activity I'd like you to do in accordance with Great Gatsby.
Great, and that's a great segue. It seems like we're sort of naturally progressing through our conversation points too. Thinking about those strategies around engagement, assessment, communication. Brad, what thoughts do you have for the group?
Yeah, I'll speak to kind of both that schedule and that engagement idea. I think, Mary, that was a great idea of like, you know, we can't schedule minute by minute. You know, like I said, we're not living on a bell schedule. And I think the one thing to remember right now is think about your actual classroom, and you're not providing 45 minutes or 50 minutes or whatever your number is of you talking the entire time. I mean, I hope not. We know better than that in 2020, right? How often are kids just working? So now they might not have, you know, you deliver your 5-10 minute, whether it's a video or whatever, but give them that flexibility. Now, again, flexibility is great, but with that suggestion of, okay, what is your schedule going to look like? So Mary, you made some great points there in a weekly ideal, not necessarily a day by day and from 10:53 to 11:25, right? Like, so having that flexibility built in. What I am finding, or what I've done with engaging students in my online class, is allowing them the flexibility and the ability to do some sort of like a task that allows them to work and find information. We do have to remember, and what I mean by that is they're working on a project, not necessarily just going through read this, answer these questions. and this is going to look different than what maybe your traditional curriculum looks like, because we don't have, and this is part of the engagement thing, this is one of the things I found out is really hard. I can't look over a kid's shoulder to find out what they're doing. I can't walk around my classroom to find out, hey, you're not doing what you need to. Here's what has to happen. You end up with checkpoints at certain points to get that, but you don't get that constant interaction and feedback. And that's tough. It is. But there's ways around that in terms of giving them something that they can look at on their own, and then a product in the end. So for example, having some sort of engaging task overall, rather than read this, answer these questions, and having, this week you're going to research, and again, I'll just use a chemistry example. We're going to find chemical reactions. You're going to go on YouTube and you're going to find a video with a really cool chemical reaction that you like, and you're going to tell what type of compound is in it, what type of and we maybe haven't covered that. I haven't necessarily delivered that information, quote unquote, deliver that information. You're going to put some ownership on them, right? They're going to have to look up, is it a compound? What type of compound? What does this mean? What are the different types of reactions? I don't know. Well, we can find that information. It's a Google search, right? And that's going to be on them to do that. That's going to look different than our traditional classroom, right? I don't have a PowerPoint set up going through displacement reaction, single replacement, maybe you do, but I think in terms of this engaging at this time is going to be more of that, hey, let's use all this information we have available to us out there online, but here's that essential question. Here's something for you to really look at. And again, maybe that's that weekly parameter, like Mary said, and I think that's a really good way to look at it. And at the end of the week, we're going to check in and see where everyone is. And if you need to schedule individual meetings, you do that, or however that is. But I think the hard part, and again, I don't know what districts are asking, but to sit here and say every kid's going to log on to your class meeting at 10:53 is really, really going to be a difficult ideal at this point. So I think finding as much flexibility as possible while still directing, here's the outcome that I want. How you get to that outcome might look different from every kid in your class. And that's some control that you might have to give up from our brick and mortar classroom. And that's what I'm finding in my project-based class that I teach online. So that's my 2 cents on that right now. And
I wonder if the panel could follow up. There were some questions in the chat about some of like the FACE courses, the tech ed courses, and Brad, you had mentioned using YouTube videos and things like that. But for the panel, how do you handle some of those things that would typically be a hands-on in class kind of thing? So for ELA, maybe it's group reads or, discussions. In chemistry, certainly, oh my goodness, all of those sorts of things. So how do you manage those? And Jamie, maybe you can speak to that as well in terms of what that looks like in some of the other classes.
Sure. So all of our classes that would typically have labs in the school are set up to have labs that kids can do within their own kitchen. And Brad can speak more to like the chemistry labs and the science labs, but the FACS is definitely set up. Kids still have to do their sewing projects. Kids get their own materials and take their sewing machines and then submit pictures or submit videos of what they've done. I think the biggest thing with labs is the write-up that comes after the lab that the kids have done. And that's what the teachers usually look at, the reflection of what they learned doing the process. But yeah, I'd really like Brad to take that question with his science background, with his science, how the labs work virtually.
Quite honestly, I don't have a great answer for you. I wish I did. It's tough. That's one thing that I struggled with previously when I was in the school I was in. We didn't offer AP. We just didn't have enough students, but I had a couple kids that took an AP, and that's one thing that brings kids to Jedi, doing an AP Chem class. You can't send all the chemicals home. They don't have a physical lab. They can interpret data. They can look at things that way. There's not, again, this is talking chemistry wise. I think other sciences and maybe like face and stuff like that, that's different because the kitchen, you know, you can still cook a meal. You can still do those sorts of things. Physics, you can build a, you know, you can build a Rube Goldberg machine and figure out simple machines. Earth science, you can go out and take pictures of the moon phases and things like that. It depends on where you're at, obviously. Biology, you can track the birds and, you know, or you can look at data, but there's so much online and it's not the same. Don't get me wrong. It's not the same. No, I will never say that a virtual lab and watching a video will replace kids doing it in a classroom. But if that's your best option, that's your best option. One resource that's out there through Vernier. Those of you that are science teachers know Vernier probably, called Pivot Interactives, and also FET, and I'll put those in the chat when I get a second here, that you can link to, and they're like simulations and virtual labs. A lot of people use them in the regular classroom anyways, and again, simulations, they're not going to replace an actual lab, don't get me wrong. But if that's your option and it gets kids engaged in data collection and seeing something, even if it's virtually, that's going to be better than just reading about something. So you try to do that the best you can and juggle it, and don't think you're going to make a replacement, but make an alternative.
Great, and that seems to be kind of the conversation in the chat too. And for Emily and Mary, we have a lot of teachers who just went live this week or are going live next week. So in terms of the non-negotiable tools and structures, and Beth was saying, you know, first and foremost, create the communication so that your students know you're there and you know that we're going to be okay. So that sort of assurance piece. I'm wondering if you could talk about some of the getting started. They don't have a semester to plan. They're going live Monday, or they went live already this week. What would be some of those sort of getting started non-negotiables? And Brad, you talked about some of the tools. And I'm wondering if the panel could offer some of those suggestions too.
One thing I wrote in the chat is if you're able to, and I know it depends on everyone's schedules, maybe send out to your group of students a possibly like weekly plan of kind of what you're going to be doing or what you want them to focus on. So this gives students and their guardians a lot of time to kind of work at their own pace. So you're able to send that out like sort of like a lesson, maybe not, but so they kind of know what they can focus on and they can work at their own pace. I think that would be great. And one thing I wanted to add for ELA, which would be a really good idea to kind of keep students engaged, I was just thinking about this, is if you're reading a novel as a group right now, you can have a Google Doc possibly where students can ask questions and kind of respond back and forth to each other to kind of keep that classroom feel going. That's just another idea I had, I think, to kind of keep them engaged with each other.
That's a great idea, Emily, and that's what I was doing with my Great Gatsby. I created a document that they could then ask questions, because sometimes they have the same question, and that way I'm not responding, 30 different times to the same question. And then if they're reading that document, then their questions are answered. And to work on some of those other projects, as Brad was saying, that it doesn't just have to be a worksheet or a packet. I tend not to do that in my English classes because they get bored with that real quickly, but having that discussion and then planning some type of activity or a little project. For example, after they've read 3 chapters of Gatsby, I have them do a little project about billboards in the 20s and the importance of communication that way. And we do a little project and they actually design a billboard that might have appeared. So what I'm going to have them do now is take a picture of that and then upload it so that we can all see the billboards, because they're not going to be, of course, showing those in class. So we'll just, keep those in classroom. So it makes them do a little more research. It's not just something right straight out of the book. It's not something that I'm feeding them. Again, I'm trying to make them become more independent scholars rather than, being the sage on the stage. I want to be the guide on the side and encourage them to do some of these other things because they have to take an active role in their learning.
And so many of you talked about the discussion boards. There's a question in the chat. You mentioned using Google Docs for discussion boards. Any other tools that you recommend for using discussion rooms?
I'm pretty sure Google Classroom has an option to do that back and forth, and I can help people with that if they need it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go in, I think you can communicate back and forth as well if you're using that tool.
Absolutely. Great, so we have just about 5 minutes left, so we'll open it up to Q&A. Beth, what other things are you seeing in the chat that we haven't discussed yet?
I think we're hitting a lot of it, and the panelists are putting in their comments as well. I think people are wondering how to get started, which we talked about a little bit. One thing that I put in here too, just to explain, choice boards are a great way to start, and I put in a link. And that what those are basically a list of choices. You can make it, you know, as graphically enhanced as you want, or it can just be links on a doc, and students can choose from 3 different areas to hit those essential standards that you're trying to create by the end of the year. And then the other piece that we were just talking about are online discussions. So just like, was it Emily, I think you were just talking about Google Classroom. That's a nice, safe place. Remember, we want to think about those security and privacy settings for students. So students, you invite students to your Google Classroom and you can have discussions all day long if you want. So that would be probably the best choice. And then we're looking at, Brad had put in some, here's Veneer, so put in some resources in here, just so you know, we'll capture this chat for you and make sure that you get these resources on the follow-up. And then there's a question about bilingual resources, Val.
Yeah, and so Terry just responded to that. Terry Massiarchin is our director at CISA 2, and there she is. Terry, do you want to turn your mic on and talk about some of the offerings and tools and resources that your center is offering? Oh, Mitchell needs to unmute her. So in the meantime, I know that in our CISA 2 COVID offerings that Terry and our EL team is offering a number of different webinars, tools and resources to serve our teachers as well. Are you live, Terry?
I am.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, is Terry there?
There
Okay.
she is, yeah.
What was the question?
So the question in the chat is tools and resources to serve our English learners. And I wondered if you could talk about some of the offerings that your center will be providing.
Sure. So one of the things that we can do, and maybe the best place to put it, Val, would be in your agenda, because I'm not going to be able to get to it right now.
Sure.
But Audrey Lasandak, one of my coworkers, and I believe she's also on the call, did a webinar last week, Virtual Learning for Multilingual Learners. And so that is now a recorded webinar with closed caption that people can view. And then from that, we also have a folder of resources. I think really the biggest thing is to determine what the purpose of the activity or learning is, and then what are those chunks of that content that you can pull out and support the students. The other thing is to determine whether you're going to be doing kind of more paper and pencil, which I know some districts are doing, or if you're going to be doing virtual. So that folder that we can share with you addresses all of those kind of topics. One of the other things that we have in that folder is a resource page of various resources that are available. And I think everyone is kind of on resource overload. I think we have a lot of the what, it's more of the how that we need. And so that webinar can help with some of that.
Great. And so again, that's on the CISA 2 website, Virtual Learning for Multilingual Learners. And it's in, did you put it in the chat? I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm going to put it.
Great.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
And then what I'll do is, I'm sorry, what I'll do is on the agenda, I will send you the link, Val. It's just that it will take me a little while and I don't want to take up time in this webinar to do that. But I'll send you the link, and then when people go back to your agenda, they'll be able to have the link to the folder of resources.
Yep, and those are all on our COVID-19 resources on CISA 2.
Perfect.
As well. We are quickly running out of time. Our guests have graciously shared their email addresses. They are in the chat and they are also at the top of the shared document. Watch our COVID-19 at the CISA 2 website for upcoming webinars and resources. And we are certainly looking for your suggestions. Where are you struggling? Where are you needing support? Please don't hesitate to drop us an email as we want to make sure that we are serving your needs. Closing thoughts, Beth?
Just one more thing. There was one question about math for math teachers. How do we support math instruction and learning in this virtual environment? And so a couple suggestions for you is, number one, if you can use any kind of video like a Zoom has a whiteboard, you actually can show your instruction that way. The other piece is actually recording your instruction, just like Khan Academy does, but use Screencastify or Loom. Those are both Google extensions. But students want to see it from you. They really want to see their teachers, so make sure that you have the webcam on in the bottom while you're recording your instruction. But for synchronous, you can also use Ziteboard is an option, or app is another whiteboard app where you can actually use that online as well. So look for tools that are either inside the video conferencing tool, or you can go to an app and actually use that as well. If you have a Chromebook that has or a laptop that has a touch screen, it's very easy for math teachers to do it with a stylus that way as well. So just some ideas.
Great. And Mitchell put in the chat too, we do have some math webinars coming up. They are located in the chat room, and again, we'll be sharing resources with you. And Terry has also shared the EL resources. Thank you so much to our participants. We really, really appreciate your time and expertise. Thank you for sharing your contact information. And everyone else, thank you so much for attending. We wish you well. It's almost the weekend. So take care, be well, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Good luck, everyone.
Good luck.